So today we are learning about absolute value. So everyone underline the word absolute value, and I'm going to give you the definition of absolute value. Please write this down. Absolute value means distance from zero. And distance is always positive. So I'm just going to put I'm going to put positive in parentheses. Distance is always positive. I've never heard of anyone traveling negative distance, okay? And just as an example before we start, if you think about a number line, here's 0 in the middle. Absolute value means the distance that a number is away from 0. So how far is 2 from 0? It's 2. So that means this is how I would write it. The absolute value of 2 is 2. Because 2 is 2 spaces away from 0. Does that make sense? Okay, let's do a different number. What about -2? How far is -2 away from 0? Yep, it's just 2 spaces. 1, 2. It's just 2 spaces away from 0. So do you guys see how both a +2 and a -2 will give you 2? Okay? -2 is 2 spaces away from 0, and +2 is 2 spaces away from 0. Okay? So we're always going to have 2 answers. All right, so let's answer the warm-up question. What numbers can I put in here so that the distance is 7? Yep, 7 and -7. So the absolute value of 7 is 7, and the absolute value of -7 is 7. So the x value could be 7 or -7. They're both 7 spaces away from 0. Does that make sense, guys? Yeah, this just wants the x values. You can just put -7 and 7. Yeah. All right, let's look at this number 2. It says, what absolute value is equal to -4? Really? What's the absolute value of 4? It's 4, isn't it? What's the absolute value of -4? 4. On a number line, -4 is just 4 spaces away from 0. So that means there is no number that is -4 distance from 0. Remember, distance can't be negative. So this type of question, you're going to put no solution. There is no number that is -4 spaces away from 0. Okay? All right, so that was our warm-up for today. Today, we're going to be solving absolute value equations. And I'm just going to start off with some simple steps, okay? The first step is to isolate it, okay? So let's do an example first. I'm going to look at y'all's paper. And I'm going to do number 5. Let's do number 5. So number 5 looks like this. Y - 1, absolute value, plus 17 equals 23. Step number 1, let's go back to the steps, is to isolate the absolute value expression. So guys, right now, this absolute value expression is not isolated. It's not the only thing on this side. There's a plus 17 here. How do I get rid of plus 17? Yes, I'm going to subtract 17 from both sides. That's my first step. So now I have the absolute value of y - 1 equals 23 minus 17 is 6. That's step 1, isolating it. Now you guys see how the absolute value symbols, it's by itself? Okay, it's now by itself. That's step 1. Let's go back and see what step 2 was. Okay, now that we isolated it, step 2 is to create 2 cases. You're going to set the inside, so the stuff that's on the inside, equal to both the positive and negative value. Okay, so guys, I'm going to set the inside, so this stuff in here, I'm going to set it to the positive value, so 6. And my second case, I'm going to set it to -6. I'm going to create 2 cases. And you don't need the absolute value bars anymore. We're setting up 2 cases. All right, just like there's 2 numbers for absolute values, there's going to be 2 cases. All right, and then we're going to solve. So I'm going to add 1, I get 7. So my first answer is y equals 7. And then my next answer, add 1, I get y is equal to -5. Those are my two answers. Okay, so let's go back to our steps. First we isolated, then we created our two cases, and then we solved. Now step 4, it says check for extraneous solutions. I'm going to check my answers. How do I check my answers in math? You plug it back in. So guys, I'm going to write down my original problem over here. Let me just erase all of this. I'm going to go back to the original. This is what it looked like originally. Instead of y, what should I put in? 7. So let's plug that in. I'm going to plug in a 7. I'm checking my answers. So I'm going to plug in a 7. What's 7 minus 6? I'm sorry, 7 minus 1? 6. Okay, so what's the absolute value of 6? 6, right? Because 6 is 6 spaces away from 0. So it's just 6. And is 6 plus 17, 23? Oh, that's true. So that means this is correct. This is an answer. You have to check your answers, make sure they're true. All right, next I'm going to plug in this -5. I'm checking my answers. So let me go back over here. I'm going to start over. This time I'm going to plug in a -5. So I'm going to plug in a -5. Okay, -5 minus 1. And what's the absolute value of -6? It's just 6. Okay, remember absolute value is distance. So you always get something positive right here. So this will be 6 plus 17 equals 23. Is that true? Yep, that's true. So that means these are both our answers. Okay. Sometimes you're going to get something that's not true when you plug it back in. So I'm going to show you an example of that. All right, everyone okay? All right. Let's flip over to the next page. I'm going to do some hard ones with you. I'm going to do number 14. Okay, I'm going to do number 14. This says 2 absolute value of h plus 8 equals 14h. Okay. I'm just going to give you guys a hint. Whenever you see a variable on this side, you might get an extraneous solution, okay? If you just have a plain old number there, you probably won't have an extraneous solution. So let's talk about what that is, what that means. So guys, is my absolute value by itself? No, there's a 2 being multiplied. How do I get rid of this 2? Yep, we're going to divide this side by 2 and cancel it out. And then I'm going to divide this side by 2. So what I am left with is absolute value h plus 8 equals 7h. Now is my absolute value isolated. Good, let's go back to our notes. We finished step 1. Step 2 is to create two cases. I'm going to set the inside equal to both the positive and negative value of the number on the opposite side of the equal sign. So let's do that step. Okay, so I'm going to create my two cases. I'll have h plus 8 equals 7h. That's my positive one. And then h plus 8 equals negative 7h. That's my negative case. And then we just solve. Okay, so we need to combine like terms. That means my h's need to go together. So I'm going to subtract h. H minus h is 0, so that's gone. I'm also going to subtract h over here. So I get 8 equals, what's 7h minus 1h? 6h. All right, and then you divide both sides by 6. So we have h is equal to 8/6. And we always need to simplify our fractions. And do we know how to simplify fractions? It will be 4/3. How did you get 4/3? Yep, you divided both by 2. So we're going to simplify this. So h is 8 divided by 2 is 4, and 6 divided by 2 is 3. So that's our first answer. And then we're going to solve the second one. Okay. I want my h's together. We want to combine like terms. So I'm going to move this, subtract h over here, subtract h over here. So guys, what is -7 minus 1? Yes, -8. So this becomes -8h. So this is where I am now. Now we are going to divide both sides by a -8. -8. Those cancel, and I'm left with h. 8 divided by -8 is -1. So these are my two potential answers. Okay, now I'm going to check my work. I always need a check. So I'm going to go back to my original problem over here. This was my original problem. Let me erase all this. This is what it looks like in the beginning. Okay, so this is my original problem. I'm going to check my answers. So I'm going to plug in this one, -1. So I'm going to erase these h's. I have an h here and an h here. I'm going to put a -1 inside. So I'm going to put a -1 right here and a -1 right there. And we're going to check and see if it's a true statement. What's -1 plus 8? It's just 7, okay? And what's the absolute value of 7? It's always positive, so 7. And these are being multiplied. And this side was 14 times -1 over here? -14. So guys, is 2 times 7 -14? Oh, that's false. That's false. So guys, that means this is what we call an extraneous solution. This is called an extraneous solution. We got something that is actually false when you plug it back in. So this is not an answer. Okay? It was just extra stuff that came out. This is an answer. This is not. You have one solution, which is 4/3, but this one is not a solution. It was extraneous. It was something extra that came out, okay? Because when you plug it back in, it doesn't make sense. Okay, now let me just prove to you real quick why 4/3 is an answer choice. I don't want to deal with fractions too much, but we'll go ahead and talk about it. All right, so if I plug in 4/3, we'll see that it's actually a solution. We'll get something true. Okay, so guys, if fractions confuse you, you got to go back and look at videos on how to add fractions. I know we haven't seen this since elementary. So this is 4/3 plus, we get the same denominator, so this is 24/3. And this is 14 times 4, what is that? 46? No, 56. Divided by 3. Okay. And then 24 plus 4, that's 28 over 3. Multiply it by 2. 2 times 28 is 56. So you get 56/3 equals 56/3. So that's true. Okay. So this one's true. This one's extraneous. So guys, let's go back to our notes. Oh, right here. It says, what are extraneous solutions? How would you guys describe an extraneous solution? False. It's false when you plug it back in? Okay. So answers. I'm not going to say answers because they're really not answers. All right, I'm going to take that off. They're extra solutions that are false. They are not solutions. So extraneous solutions are not solutions, okay? So you want to check and make sure that all the answers you get are actually your answers. Okay? And I'll do another problem with you guys. So looking at y'all's practice for today, are there any questions where you're like, ooh, I want Miss Lewis to do that one? Number 10. Okay, I'll do number 10. Okay, let's go to another slide. All right, so number 10, it says absolute value of 3a plus 12 divided by 9 equals 0. So guys, is my absolute value by itself? No, it has a divided by 9 on the bottom. So how do I get rid of a division by 9? Multiply by 9. So multiply this by 9 and it cancels out. Multiply this side by 9. What's 0 times anything? 0. So what we get is absolute value of 3a plus 12 equals 0. So I'm going to set up my two cases. I have 3a plus 12. Can I really have a positive 0 and a negative 0? Not really. So just do that. We're going to set it equal to 0 and solve. So I'm going to subtract 12. Subtract 12. So I have 3a is 0 minus 12 is negative 12. Then we'll divide both sides by 3. So I get a is equal to negative 4. And let's plug it in to make sure it's true. Let's plug in a negative 4 into the original problem. All right. So I'm going to go back to the original problem here. Okay, so instead of an a, I'm going to plug in that negative 4. So plug in a negative 4 there. All right, guys, 3 times negative 4 is negative 12. And what's negative 12 plus 12? 0, absolute value of 0. 0, 0 divided by 9, 0. So it's true. This is your solution. It's not extraneous. When we plugged it in, it was true. Yes. Yep, if it's equal to 0, you won't have the two cases because there's no such thing as positive and negative 0. Any other number, yes, you would do two cases, a positive 1 and a negative 1. I'll do one more question for you guys. How about number 15? I feel like 15 will be tricky. So let's do 15. Okay. All right, so number 15, we have absolute value 8 minus 2n minus 5n equals n plus 2. All right, is my absolute value by itself? No, it is not. So I'm going to get rid of minus 5n by adding 5n to both sides. Okay. So what I have is absolute value 8 minus 2n equals, guys, what's n plus 5 more n's? Yeah, so this is 6n plus 2. Is my absolute value by itself? Perfect. Let's do our two cases. So my first case, I have 8 minus 2n equals 6n plus 2. Just have the same exact thing. My other case, I need to make it negative. So I have 8 minus 2n equals a negative 6n and a minus 2. Uh-oh. I can't write it without making it switch. Okay, that's a minus 2 there. I'm running out of space. Okay, so now we just solve, guys. So I'm going to add 2n to both sides. So I will have 8 equals 6n plus 2n is 8n. How do I get rid of this plus 2? Subtract 2. So I'm going to cross it out, subtract 2 on this side. 8 minus 2 is 6. And you always divide by this number here in front of the variable. So the coefficient is 8. So we're going to divide by 8. So I get n equals 6/8. But can that be simplified? What are we going to divide numerator and denominator by? 2. So my answer simplified is 6 divided by 2 is 3. 8 divided by 2 is 4. Always simplify your fractions. That's my first answer. Let's do the next one. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add 6n to both sides. What's -2n plus 6n? Yep, so this will be 8 plus 4n equals -2. Next step, we got to get rid of this 8 because we want n by itself. So we're going to subtract 8, subtract 8. Now pause there if you're still writing. So I'll have 4n equals -2 minus 8 is -10. You always divide by the coefficient, the number in front of the variable, which is a 4. So I'm going to divide both sides by 4. Divide this side by 4, divide this side by 4. So I get n equals, let's simplify this. -10 divided by 2 is -5. -4 divided by 2 is 2. So these are my two answers. However, it might be extraneous, so we have to check. We have to plug it in and make sure it's true, okay? And I have some foresight. I know this one is extraneous. Let me show you why. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the original up here. All right, this was the original. I know fractions, we don't like them, but I'm going to go through it. Okay, so we got to check our answers. -5 halves, -5 halves, -5 halves. I'm going to go through this again once the bell rings. I think the bell is going to ring shortly, so we'll pick up shortly. Okay, continuing, we distribute this. So -2 times -5. -2 times -5 is a +10, so this will be 10 over 2. -5 times -5 is a +25 over 2 equals -5 times, oh, sorry, that's not being multiplied. So we can just leave that as it is. So I'm going to bring this down. I have -5 over 2 plus 2. So all I did was just distribute when I have a number right outside of the parentheses. Okay, so now we got to deal with these fractions. Well, first of all, 10 divided by 2 is just 5. So I can erase 10 over 2 and just put a 5 there. This is just 5. And 8 minus 5 is 3. And the absolute value of 3 is just 3. So I can get rid of these bars. And then I'm going to add 25 halves. Now let's see what this side is equal to. This side, I need the same denominator. So I'm going to put this over 1. And my denominator, it needs to be 2. So I'm going to multiply this by 2 and multiply the top by 2. So this will be -5 halves plus 4 halves. Now that the denominators are the same, I can combine these. So you keep the denominator, you combine the numerators. So -5 plus 4 is -1. And I can already tell you that 3 plus something is not equal to -1/2. Okay, I can already tell that this is false. However, we can keep going if we want. Put this over 1, multiply this by 2, multiply this by 2. So 3 over 2, or 3 times 2 is 6. Okay. And 6 plus 25 is 31. So what we have here, I'm going to put it over here. We have 31 halves is the same as -1/2. And that is false. So I know that -5 halves, when you plug it in, it gives you something false. So this is an extraneous solution. It's extraneous. So this is not an answer. You only have one answer, and it's this one. This is not an answer. It's extraneous. All right, I'm going to pause here. and let you guys do some practice. All right, guys, this is number 12. Number 12 in the practice. So it says negative 16 is equal to negative 12 times the absolute value of k divided by 5 plus 8. So the last thing I said was plus 8. So let's get rid of the plus 8. How do we get rid of it? Subtract it. So I'm going to subtract it from this side. And what we have is negative 16 minus 8. That's negative 24. Everything else will just come down. I have negative 12 times k divided by 5, absolute value. Okay, so how do we get rid of that negative 12? This is being multiplied together because they're right next to each other. So the opposite would be to divide. So to go ahead and divide both sides by negative 12. Okay, so negative 24 divided by negative 12 is 2. And I'm left with the absolute value of k divided by 5. Finally, is my absolute value isolated? Yes, now it's finally by itself. Now we're going to move on to step 2. And step 2 is creating your two equations. So I'm going to have one equaling a positive 2, and then I'm going to have one equaling a negative 2. Those are my two cases. Step 3 is solve. Now we're going to solve it. So guys, can y'all read this with me? This says what? Okay, instead of over, what can y'all say? Divided by. So this is k divided by 5. What's the opposite of dividing by 5? Multiplying by 5. So just multiply both sides by 5. So we get k is 10. That's one of our answers. And let's get the next one. Multiply by 5 on both sides. And you get k is equal to negative 10. And we can always check if these are extraneous or not. So I'm going to plug these back into the original problem. You guys can stop here if you want to. Y'all can go ahead and do the practice. I'm just going to show you guys that this is actually a solution. So I'm going to go back to the original problem. Yep. So I'm going to plug in a 10. So instead of a k, in fact, let me put in a negative 10. I'll take this one first. So I'm going to plug in a negative 10. What's negative 10 divided by 5? 2. Okay, so we get negative 16 is equal to negative 12 times the absolute value of negative 2 plus 8. What's the absolute value of negative 2? It's just 2. So guys, it's just 2. Absolute value makes everything positive. Now, is this negative 122? What's happening here? What is this? What do I put in between these? Okay, that works. What do we do though? Multiply. It's not addition. If it was addition, you would see a plus sign right here. It's not addition. When things are right next to each other, that means you're multiplying. Okay, so guys, we're doing negative 12 times 2, which is negative 24. And then bring down that plus 8. And is negative 24 plus 8 negative 16? Is this true? Yay, this is true. So that means this is a solution. That one worked. And if you plug in a 10, you'll get the same answer. Because 10 divided by 5 will give you the 2. You'll get the same thing. Okay? So yes, you need to check all of these. So that means if you follow the steps, you isolate the absolute value, then you create your two cases, a positive one and a negative one. Then you solve, and then you check your answer. Okay, so those are the 4 steps.